I love to share something about myself with all of you. And if you spend any time in conversation with me, you quickly learn that I'm an open book. I'm honest, perhaps a bit more honest than you even expected me to be. And I try to model what it means to be vulnerable, so that you too can seek to feel safe being vulnerable with one another. Because it is out of our vulnerability that we can deepen our relationships with one another, and we can see our connectedness more prominently than we see our differences. We each bring our own context into relationship. Our different family structures, the way they are expressed, our vocations, or the way we live our lives are all just a bit different. And we can easily spot our differences in the way that we look, the way we speak, the way we dress, the way we spend our time. That vulnerability with one another opens our hearts to see our created God images in one another. The very heart of who we are is essentially the same, beloved by God, desired by God, and commissioned through our baptism to seek and serve God in one another. So in an effort toward that goal of being vulnerable, I want to share with you my newest hobby. I'm a beginner approaching, distantly, an intermediate potter. I'm a wheel-throwing potter. I started throwing pottery on the wheel about 6 years ago. I dabbled. Then the pandemic came, and then we moved, and I have a studio here, and I have become more intentional taking pottery classes each week in an effort to make time to preserve my day off, but mostly to improve my skills. So I started that last September. I love the way that the clay feels in my hands as it spins on the wheel. I love trimming my pieces once they are leather hard into something that looks a little more like I pictured they might look if someone else did them. And I love the mystery of the glazing process, because no matter how hard I try, it never turns out exactly like I pictured. I have smashed an equal amount of pieces on the wheel that I have completed in my efforts to get better. And I have a couple of favorites, a couple that will never see the light of day also. And I have one with me today. And it is not what I intended, but it has been turned into something else because I messed up when I made it. I threw it too thinly, then I trimmed it even more thinly, and so, unfortunately, we had a little boo-boo in the kiln. This boo-boo was a hole. I was going to put a hole in it because it was going to be a planter, but I did not have to. The kiln did that for me. And I was a little heartbroken by that because that was not my plan. But I want you to picture that hole as we talk about our life of vulnerability and connectedness. Just stay with me on this. We'll get there. To the gospel, I point because we are in the midst of Luke's retelling of Jesus' teaching and healing early in his ministry. There is an energy in the crowds that are gathered to hear him teach as they seek to be healed, and he was becoming quite famous in the area, even in his early days of ministry. And that energy wasn't always positive. Everyone wasn't glad to hear what he had to say, because he was speaking truth to power, and that is a risky part of being vulnerable as a leader. Our gospel selection today is a continuation of last week's sermon on the plain. You remember the blessings to the poor and the woes to the rich. He's doubling down today on that teaching that follows God's desire for us, encouraging us, admonishing us that we must seek to resist the dangerous and somewhat innate human desire to measure our own success or the success of others through the lens of power and wealth alone. And the words that we heard proclaimed today as Jesus' own words teach us of the dangers of judgment and the need for forgiveness. And unless you just joined the Christian church today, you already know that. These are things we know to be true in our minds, but our hearts and our minds often betray us. We experience harm or someone wronging us in some way. We are easily, and I do mean easily, divided by our differences in today's world. Jesus closes this section of the gospel reading by saying this: "A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put onto your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back." This line of today's gospel is an invitation to recall, to reimagine, to return to the heart of who we are created to be as beloveds in right relationship with God and one another. So here is that pot that I made. It's the first one that came out of the kiln with the boo-boo. But I love it a lot, surprisingly. Before I threw it that day, I was just starting to be able to go, oh, I think I'll make a today. And then maybe I'll be able to make a today. That's how you know you're still a beginner. It's because sometimes you think it's a plate, and then sometimes it's a vase. You never know. I could picture it in my mind's eye. I was picturing the shape before I began to center and create it from a ball of clay that was just a ball. I was trying to picture it all the way to the end, what the glaze might look like, because I still thought I could pick that at that point, and what it might be used for once it was finished, and maybe I would even give it to someone in my family who loves all the pottery they keep getting now. I was kind of disappointed, to be honest with you, that it didn't come out whole. It had a hole. Wasn't my intent, you can tell. Well, I don't know. Maybe my hole wouldn't be round if I tried, I don't know. But it was definitely an error actually at wiring it off of the wheel. But I have still loved it, and I hold tight to its potential. It's gonna hold a succulent. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, it's not a spoiler. It's gonna hold a succulent once I can get some time to get a succulent. And I was thinking about this pot when I was thinking about today's gospel, because it's a lot like our laps as we receive the good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. It didn't turn out exactly as I intended, because it can't hold what's put inside there without it running out. Perhaps it is wise for us to think of ourselves as created with an intention and out of an abundance of love, and that we are not meant to hold that love and that grace and that mercy and that forgiveness for ourselves alone. Our vulnerabilities are indeed our strengths. Love for others not like us, our enemies even. Come on, Jesus. But that love is given to us, and we get to choose to give it away. Loving those who are easy to love is a little like Dietrich Bonhoeffer's definition of cheap grace. It's pretty easy. It doesn't cost us a thing. Loving those who repel us, though, frankly, that's something else entirely. That doesn't mean we should justify keeping it for ourselves. And it also doesn't mean that we need to stay in abusive relationships where we are being harmed. Instead, it is rather like the pull of a magnet to true north. It is our call to see that our vulnerability and others' vulnerabilities Help us weave together the tapestry of what our collect for today describes as a true bond of peace and all virtue. Let's be real, even seasoned professional potters end up with boo-boos, holes in their pieces or smashed clay on the wheel, or maybe something they never intended to create in the first place. But our God, our potter, creates us perfectly and wonderfully as our loving God intends, ready with a lap that spills over. Trying to keep that love for ourselves alone, or only sharing it with those who we feel somehow deserve it, misses the point. That God creates more than just us. Immigrants seeking safety are created in God's image. Prisoners on death row are created in God's image. The person who took your parking place that you'd been waiting for that busy day at HEB is created in God's image. People who speak from their position of power using words that sound like hate to your ears are created in God's image. If God is indeed our God, then God is indeed all of us our God. Theirs too. Who are we then to withhold what God so freely offers? Today's psalmist had words that rang like a clanging cymbal in my ears as I was preparing to preach today. Our choir did a fabulous job of singing them for us today, but they're good enough to hear once more through the spoken word. Do not fret yourself because of evildoers. Do not be jealous of those who do wrong, for they shall soon wither like the grass, and like the green grass fade away. Put your trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and feed on its riches. Take delight in the Lord, and he shall give you your heart's desire. Commit your way to the Lord and put your trust in him, and he will bring it to pass. He will make your righteousness as clear as the light and your just dealing as the noonday. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret yourself over the one who prospers, the one who succeeds in evil schemes. Refrain from anger. Leave rage alone. Do not fret yourself, it leads only to evil. For evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait upon the Lord shall possess the land. In a little while the wicked shall be no more. You shall search out their place, but they will not be there. But the lowly shall possess the land. They will delight in an abundance of peace. But the deliverance of the righteous comes from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord will help them and rescue them. He will rescue them from the wicked and deliver them because they seek refuge in him. May our laps overflow as we go out into this world and spread the love of God. Amen.